All right, guys, so you have made it to our final cohort-wide training session. I can't believe we're here already. I feel like this cohort went so fast by design, but also the days feel short and the months feel shorter. I don't know about y'all, but that's how it's felt to us over here. So welcome. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for making it all the way to the end. We hope that you've had a good time and learned all of the SNAP E&T things. I am going to hand it over to my fantastic technical assistance team to deliver most of the content today.
All right, welcome everybody. Here's our agenda. So, like Sam said, you are almost to the finish line. We'll do a quick review of what we presented in our last webinar focused on funding and budgeting and allowable costs. Then today's session, we're going to focus in on tying everything together. So full circle from the very beginning when we viewed the Venn diagram to becoming prepared to making application to become a third-party provider. Then we'll have our folks that are joining us today share out about their journey, and then we will talk about next steps. Okay, so I'm going to start us out. We're going to do a brief review of budgets and funding alignment. And before we jump into this graphic here on the screen, I do want to just sort of harken back to that Venn diagram. I'm sure you all remember that yellow circle with the blue bubbles in the middle. Really sort of, that's the starting point, right? That's where we started identifying the right type of participants. We identified the right type of funding, non-federal funding. We worked on understanding the right type of services, and then having the overall staff capacity to do this work, as well as being a good fit within the state context and the state's priorities. And so what we've learned along the way is that this is not a traditional grant, right? This is a reimbursement model. And this graphic here really shows us sort of that quick assessment that we can do to get us started thinking about, how well of a fit we are for the SNAP E&T program, and thinking about your reimbursement potential. So first, identifying your non-federal funds, right? We know that that's essentially important. Then identifying the right type of services, which are approved within the state, and then expense for those for which are all tied to folks who are on food benefits and then enrolled in the employment and training program who are participating in those approved activities. And everything's tied to that participant and their approved activities for your potential reimbursement. You probably remember this graphic too. When we met the last time in the last webinar, we provided some examples on how to assess your funding sources, and we gave you some examples of allowable costs. We talked about analyzing your overall organization's budget by identifying revenue streams as well as expenses, then sort of shaping that down and narrowing it down to identifying the training revenue and expenses that you're currently providing, and then narrowing it down even further to identify the potential SNAP employment and training budget for approved employment and training activities. And then finally, identifying the employment and training revenue expenses that reflect the activities that you're providing to your non-E&T participants, which then reflects your E&T client ratio percentage, which then is applied to your overall costs. Okay, so that ends that section of the overview, and then I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, who's going to dig into tying it all together.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you today. So very similar to what Dina just explained too. Here is our Venn diagram. You've seen it before. Um, so, we've talked through all of the different areas. Today, we're going to talk a little bit more about the yellow circle, the state context and priorities. In addition to this green square in the middle, which is where all of these things come together. When I look at this and I see the green square in the middle, to me, in my mind, this is the budget and proposal. This is what you've identified that overlaps and really has that strong alignment with all of these areas at the same time. And we'll just say at this point, that square might be kind of small. But over time, thinking about how to stretch that, how to incorporate more, how to get closer to the edges of these things. But again, that's with time. Let's start where we start where we already have alignment, and really feel comfortable with those pieces too. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide and talk about, your program is, or is almost aligned. What comes next? And this is really looking at that yellow circle on the outside. What is the opportunity in your state? What's the context in your state? Is your state looking to expand right now? Are they looking to expand next fall? What does that look like? I will say I really am impressed by how much the members of this cohort have already done some of this research, already reached out to their state folks. So hopefully a lot of this is kind of review today and not new information for many of you, but just to kind of center it. And in addition, if you have already reached out to your state, think of this as kind of best practices and ideas for relationship building and sharing as much information about your organization as you can with the state and learning as much as you can about their goals and priorities as well. So starting out with, are these partnerships available in your state, and whether that is your state or county. Again, most of you have already engaged with this, which is great. And then figure out who. And again, I think you've done a really nice job of figuring out those individuals at your state. And there is turnover. I know in West Virginia specifically, we've seen some turnover. But I think it's always good. We know that turnover occurs. So making sure that you understand at least the department and get a couple of contacts at those departments to really dig in. If in the future you struggle finding a contact, feel free to reach out to us. We may have one, or maybe check in with other individuals, maybe at partner organizations who are already providers and might be able to provide you with a contact that you can at least get started with. Next, what does that process look like to become a provider? Very different across states, right? But there are a couple of pieces that are going to be really essential to be able to tell your story, what you'll need in your budget, how you'll talk about your alignment with the program. And again, commend everyone for taking part in this opportunity because you've been able to really identify those things and put them together in a good way and be able to talk about those things, which is really, really great. And then does your state use an intermediary? Some states do, and that's an organization positioned between the state and third-party partners to oftentimes help the state expand their grasp, expand their capacity if the state has relatively limited capacity, or if a state has, just say challenging contracting procedures, that intermediary can help support a little bit quicker movement there as well. So answering these questions, knowing these questions, and really being able to build on them is going to be really, really important as you move forward. So let's jump to the next slide and think about what external alignment looks like. So here are action steps to really help you get to that strong understanding of your local program. You have an idea, not an idea, you have a great sense of what you do as an organization. You understand your budget, you understand who you're serving, you understand what those services look like, right? And so now it's really looking at that alignment piece. What's available, Who do we talk to understand that availability? And again, thinking about relationship building that's going to help you long term as well. So 1A, we'll say at the top with a bullet, meet with your SNAP E&T agency, make that contact. And again, if you've already made that contact, build that relationship. Keep that contact. Let them know of anything new that your organization is doing between now and when that RFP opportunity exists for you. Next, and I'll say the next 4, so 2, 3, 4, and 5 don't have to be in this order. Number 1 is number 1 for a reason, but the rest are all just really great opportunities to build. So the second one is looking at other organizations who have already engaged, already are contracted with your program. They can really tell you what is needed for this program, how it works. The other pieces like number 4, reviewing the provider handbook if available, can really help you to understand that general procedures, help you really build out your capacity and understanding of SOPs that you'll need to do, in addition to reviewing your local plan, whether that's a state or county E&T plan. Those are going to be really good pieces to understand. But back to number 2, if you're talking to other providers in your area, you're going to get kind of the in between the lines of that handbook and in between the lines of that state plan to really understand, technically this is how the program looks, but what does it really look like when you have people walking in your door and you're working with them, you're referring them to the E&T program. And then lastly, we're still here. So feel free to reach out to us as needed. We're always happy to help out or direct you to resources that may be able to support your program growth, program application. And how do you find that state plan? Right? We'll get to that here in just a couple of slides. So SNAP E&T administering agency. So again, most of you have already reached out to your agency. Wonderful. This could be at your state or your county or some hybrid of both. You may need to work on a relationship with your county, even if it's a state administered program for eligibility purposes, potentially referral purposes as well. So keep that in mind. Think about those nuances as you talk to your state staff and other current providers in your area. Who is it good to build those relationships with? How do those relationships work? So really, this comes down to something we've talked about a lot through this project, and that is state flexibility. The state, even if it's state administered, even if it's county administered, there's some relationship between the two, and the amount to which those two pieces of the puzzle work together, it is really dependent state to state. So learning what works locally, learning who to talk to locally can be really, really important. 50-50 providers can really differ state to state as well. What they're expected to do, what they're allowed to do, the types of organizations that are contracted with, whether it be colleges, community-based organizations, employment social enterprise, and there's a really wide range of those. In addition, on the left, again, some agencies leverage those intermediary relationships, which can be really broad or very narrow. It may be an opportunity, even if you think about your long-term growth in your state, whether becoming an intermediary yourself could be a really good opportunity to expand services in your area or to bring in additional contract dollars to your organization. So that may be a longer term situation. We're not going to dig into that now, but that may be a longer term opportunity for your organization and for your state. As you think about growth, also feel free to reach out to us because we like talking about intermediaries as well. Learning as much as you can about this, again, building that relationship with your state or your county can be really helpful in developing what that program looks like. All right, next slide, please. So again, leaning in on your network, understand who it is that already provides services in your area, or other states that you might have relationships with. I know Sam can connect you with all sorts of organizations across the country if you're interested in kind of learning some nuances. But again, state to state, the administration piece looks different. So take what you can from those contacts. Reach out to those who you already have relationships with in your state or your area. They can be really helpful in guiding, and they see the opportunity of partnership. They want to share that with you as well. So this is a really great program for that communication, that relationship building, because in the long run, if it is like a community college, for example, that may be a good referral source in the future, that you're providing them with some potential participants in their program, or other community-based organizations that are maybe just kind of starting out with some job support things or have identified participants. Those participants may be referred to you for an employment and social enterprise work. So keep that in mind, that those referral relationships can exist as well. But building these relationships in addition to those agency staff can really be helpful. So figuring out who these folks are. I think I said that too early a few minutes ago, but in the next slide, we'll think about reading through your state plan. Your state plan has a lot of information. If you haven't read it yet, I don't know if I recommend reading it top to bottom, but there are certain parts that can be really helpful. So looking at a few pieces, at the top of each state plan, there are pieces for kind of vision, plan, growth, and goals. Program changes is what I think that section is now labeled. And that can be really, really helpful to read, to understand what those priorities are, what that future state that your agency is looking to achieve is. And that can be really helpful to think about and how you align with it. Also, the role of third-party partners can be pretty clear, sometimes not as clear, but you'll see things like reporting measures or populations of focus, even geographic areas of focus, so that you can see where your alignment occurs. And I think just as an example with the population focus, a lot of your participants will fall into some of those categories. It's helpful to look through the state plan, see those priorities, and when you're talking with the state, understand how to talk using their language, using their priority language as your own, to be able to show that you align, that you're both working on the same goals, working on supporting the same population. So think about how you can incorporate that state plan language into what you're doing as well, and how you're communicating your program. Also, which components are offered, what supportive services are offered, if there are limits to those supportive services, if those components are defined in a specific way. That would be, again, if you're in your state plan, you don't want to read it top to bottom, Control F, component overview can be very helpful to find. One thing that we've kind of seen is that oftentimes states prioritize certain components, certain services, and that's how they define their program. Other times, they choose the components that their contracted third-party partners provide. And so if there is a component that you feel like you're doing a very good job providing and it aligns with E&T generally, but it's not offered in the state plan yet, have that conversation with the state. Just say, would you be open to adding another component? Or we provide X and Y service. Would you be open to adding that to your state plan? So those are things that, state plans are every year, updated every year. So there's room for those updates to happen in the state plan if the state's willing to do it. And again, building that relationship with the state so they understand that you do a good job of that service or do a good job of that activity will really help them be more likely to add that to the state plan as well. There is the link for the state plans if you haven't looked at yours yet. Up until recently, it was more of a wild goose chase to find those state plans. Now they have them all together in one place, which is really great. Has been really beneficial for supporting you all in your work. So keeping in mind the federal fiscal year runs from October 1st through September 30th. This is something that if you're not the financial staff at your organization, you may want to key them into because your funding may be on a different schedule, potentially even the state fiscal year. So those may not align perfectly. So just think about that as you're planning out what your budget looks like and what, how many people you're hoping to serve and things like that as well. Generally, that's when contracts work as well. Some are more on a state fiscal year as well, but looking to contract October 1st is generally the time to do that. There are some opportunities for states to do a mid-year amendment to add a contract, but that's a little bit less likely than at the federal fiscal year start. Also, typical partner submission is late spring. The state needs to submit their state plan to the Food and Nutrition Administration by August 15th. So working backwards from that, they need to collect all of the projections and plans and write this state plan each year. So usually it's early, late spring, sometimes late summer or early summer when they're working through these and asking for either RFP materials or other types of projection materials. Again, worth building that relationship with your state to have a really good idea of what it is, what that timeline looks like in your area, whether a mid-year amendment is possible. If not having a start on October 1, is there a January 1 start or is there an April 1 start potential, right? And then even if you've missed that deadline for this year, if they can provide you with information on what that RFP looked like this past year and whether that's what it'll look like next year. So you can start preparing what that information is and potentially asking some more questions of your participants or putting your data internally together in a way that really reads well for an RFP of this sort. All right. That is my time. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Aaron to take us from here.
Hey, thanks so much, Andrew. So, to carry on what Andrew was just speaking about, so you've already, identified your contact at the state or the county, and you've developed those relationships and those partners. You've got that point of contact. It's really important that you understand like how your model aligns with SNAP E&T, but also in that same note, how does your model not align with SNAP E&T? Because when you're putting your proposal together, you'll need to carve out what is SNAP E&T related and what is not. And that's critically important, especially when you're talking about the fiscal side and the budgeting. So understanding what is SNAP employment and training related and what is not is really important. So making sure that you have that alignment and you know where your program aligns with SNAP E&T is going to be a critical piece, and that you know that. Once you have all that information together and you think you're ready to apply and you want to know what those next steps are, the big thing that we would say is you want to get your team together internally and start having those discussions. And that's going to be this cross-department team of your fiscal person to understand how to put together a compliant budget in your proposal. You'll want to have somebody who can help write the narrative about who you are and what your program is and how it aligns with SNAP E&T and what components you're going to be offering. Making sure that your program team, who's going to be the ones responsible for really delivering the content of your employment and training program, is on board and they understand what's involved, what the requirements are for running an employment and training program. What is your orientation and assessment process? What is the individual employment plan, if you're required to have one, going to look like? And having your program team kind of know what those things are that are going to be needed to execute a compliant SNAP E&T program, right? And then the administration and data piece, like how is the invoicing going to work? Who's going to oversee program oversight and compliance? And to make sure that you assemble that team, because that's going to be an important part of a lot of your application process, that states are going to ask you some questions about your program, and they might want to know specifically like what your invoicing processes are, or what exactly components you're delivering, and having your team together to help collaborate on that, to put your proposal together, is going to be critically important. So get your team together sooner rather than later when you think that you're getting ready to apply, and really collaborate with them throughout the process as you develop your material to submit your application. So on the next slide. So once you are ready to apply, then what you're going to do, you're going to ask again for the specific information that they are going to be in the application. And most times your application is going to want to know some fundamental things. One, of course, who are you? What is it that your organization is offering? And specifically when we're talking about employment training, you want to really think about what components you're thinking that you're going to be operating in. Are you doing job search training, supervised job search? Are you offering a vocational program like CDL? Are you doing basic education, GED? So understanding that and putting that into the terms of the component that you're wanting to align with, that you want to make sure that you understand that and have that ready. As Andrew was mentioning, not all states offer every component. And so maybe you're looking at that component list and you have a component that you would like to offer, but the state doesn't already offer. And that's where Andrew was telling you, like, reach out to the state and ask them, hey, like, we think our program best aligns with this component. It might likely also align with some other components, some of them kind of cross boundaries. But if you have that alignment and you want to ask for it, see what you need to do to apply for that component. Also, I really would advise you to come and speak to your technical assistance advisor, because they can also give you some points. And many of us have helped other providers get a new component added to the state. Because I'll be honest, I've run into some situations where even you ask the state, hey, we have this component, we want to add it. And you ask them and they're like, I have no idea how you add a component. They just kind of do the same thing. So like we can kind of help maybe advise on like what maybe a better course of action would be to kind of help walk through that if that's something that needs to happen. They're going to want to know in your proposal who in your organization is going to be interacting with your SNAP E&T program. So who are your program staff? How are you determining who is going to be eligible for SNAP and non-SNAP? What are the demographics of the participants that you're going to be serving? Where are you offering your services? One of the key questions a lot of times the proposals want to know is what target populations is your program serving? So for CEO, as an example, our target population is justice impacted individual, or as the state plan refers it to as returning citizens. So who are you serving in your program, and are you targeting any of those populations that are target populations for SNAP E&T? The funding, this is also critically important. They're definitely going to know where those non-federal funds are coming from and what those funding sources are, because you'll need to make sure that you document that in your budget proposal, most likely. And then also your administration infrastructure. They would like to see a strong infrastructure within your program to know that you're going to be able to, do some of those administrative tasks that are required with accessing SNAP E&T funding. Can you, do you have a good case management system to monitor that participants' progress through your program? How are you recording your supportive services and documenting that? How are you overseeing the development of your staff and making sure that they're doing the things that they need to do for the employment and training? What fiscal controls do you have in place to make sure that the invoicing is correct and that everything that you're submitting is allocable and directly related to your SNAP E&T? Things like that. So having a strong administration backbone backbone to your organization is going to really help making sure that you have a strong partnership with the state or county agency when you begin contracting with them. So those are some 4 key pillars that you're typically going to see in a proposal application when you're submitting to the state. Obviously, states are each run their programs individually, and the level of detail that one state asks for versus the other varies significantly. So in general, I think these 4 pieces that we've talked about here, you're going to see very often come up pretty consistently, I think. But then you'll see in some states they're going to ask for a lot more information. And so there might be a little bit more legwork that's going to be involved in getting that application submitted. The great thing that I will say is that once you get your first application done and you become approved as a provider, then you've got a lot of that legwork already established and that foundation already there. So many times, year after year, it's just making minor tweaks and updates to the existing documentation you already have. So make sure you keep everything together that you submitted for that year's submission, because guess what? In about probably I would say 8 months after you start, you're going to already be starting to plan for your next year's submission, and you want to get all of that together sooner rather than later. Some states are really good about being proactive and telling you well in advance when you need to have your application submitted. And some states are like, hey, it's submission time. We need it in 30 days. And so making sure you have all this stuff readily available so when you do the reapplication, is really helpful. But again, it's also many times just a copy and paste from the prior year. So get that first year submission done, and then you're going to be in a much better position to just do that renewal year after year. So next slide, please. So the key takeaways from all of this, we've talked about a lot of this stuff, but making sure that you understand the application and onboarding process, because it does vary from state to state. So you just reach out, get that contact, and ask them, hey, what's the process? What does it look like? What do we need to do? What's the timeline? So that you understand what those things are, so you make sure that you're on track for a timely submission, because that is really important. The states have deadlines on when they need to get their plans submitted to FNA for approval. Generally, that's around August the 15th for most states, where they have to get it into the FNA by that time in order for them to get it approved for that October 1 deadline. So the clock is normally ticking. So make sure you understand what the state or county agency's timeline is for getting that information in, because it's oftentimes, as a third-party provider, you're going to need to get that information to them sooner than what the state needs to submit to FNA, right? Because they need to take your information and incorporate it into their plan. They need to review it internally before they submit it to FNA. So understanding that timeline is really important. Draw on the fundamental program elements that have been covered in the webinars and cohorts. So go back to your landing page, understand the content that we've covered, and again, reach out to your TA team if you've got questions. Again, communication is key with your SNAP E&T providers. Also, if you look in your state plan, well, guess what? Your state plan is going to show you who other SNAP E&T providers are already enrolled in the plan program if they have them from prior years. Those are also a good resource if they're in your community. You can reach out to them too and be like, hey, I see you're a provider and you're providing these services. And if you've got questions, they can give you some insight into some of the intricacies of, that particular state or their experiences in running the program. And it's also a good partnership for, other third-party providers to work with others, to making sure that you have a strong, robust SNAP employment and training ecosystem, as you would say. CEO, where we're a provider, we oftentimes are partnering with other SNAP employment and training providers, especially where they are offering components that are differing than ours, because that means like if a participant comes to us as an example, and maybe we are not the right fit for them as far as the components that we offer in SNAP employment training, but we know that XYZ provider over here, they're providing a credentialing service that we don't have, we can refer that person to that provider. So you build that provider network internally, and you can also work together and collaborate. So be in touch with your SNAP E&T agency, but also understand who else is operating in these spaces within your community. Know that your budget, is going to be your first best estimate on what your reimbursement potential is going to be. And just realize like it is just an estimate, and oftentimes what you might find is you might submit an initial budget, but then when you actually begin delivering program and then actually begin doing invoicing, maybe you're actually finding out that you've either under budgeted in certain areas or you've over budgeted, or certain parts have been identified as not being compliant. Just know it's just an estimate, and as you go on from year to year and you start renewing, you're going to become more and more of an expert on that piece, and your budgets you're probably going to find are going to get much more accurate as you go from year to year, and you're kind of understanding how the program works and what can be included and whatnot. It's also a great time for you to be able to, as you're learning those, you're going to start learning about, oh wait, this part of my program is actually can be aligned in E&T, so you are able to maybe maximize the potential drawdown that you're able to get access to these SNAP E&T funds. You'll see at the very bottom of the slides this start small. The less complicated that you can make your program be in terms of SNAP E&T, and especially as it relates to that budget and that invoicing piece, like it's great to help you kind of get your foot in the door and start operating, and then you can start looking at what other areas might be you want to add, and also it might add to the complexity of your program, but it's also adding to the maximum drawdown that might be available to you in eligible funds. But if you want, start easy, start small, and then scale your way upward as you progress. And you become also, you've created this relationship now with the state. Once you become a partner, your first year, you're going to be kind of untested. They don't know you, you don't necessarily know them, but as you're working together, because it is a partnership between you and the state or county agency, that they're going to get more comfortable with you if you're delivering a strong program and that that you're working together. It's a lot easier to work with them as a partner and scale your organization or your program more than that. So much about this work is relationship building, right? And making sure that you have those strong partnerships in place. And because then they're going to be willing to work with you as you're trying to, expand and grow and offer more services. Next slide, please. So with that, I think this is a great stopping point just to see if anybody here has any questions so far for anything that we've covered, anything that stood out to you that you think is interesting or anything like that. Good chance to just pause for a second. If not, then this is where I get to kick it over to my good friend Riley.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, we wanted to save the last portion of today's call to really hear from you all. Give us a chance to hear about your reflections, what you have learned during our time together, what has changed. I know Samantha sent some of these prompts over for you all to kind of mull around and share with us today. So we're gonna go provider by provider in a second here, but just wanted to pause and share the questions that Samantha had shared, really thinking about, again, looking back to when you started, what's one thing you understand differently? What's changed for you? Where are you on that journey? Where are you in talking to the state agency, aligning your program? Maybe what's kind of your focus over the next 6 months? And then would love to hear kind of one action that you're going to take within the next month or so. And then of course, anything else you all would like to share. This is, I think, open. We'd love to hear your experience during this cohort, what worked well. Just really want to give the floor to you all. So I think we're going to start, if I'm remember correctly, with Fair Chance. Is Scott on?
I'm here.
Hey, Scott. Yeah, so just would love to hear your reflections. Like I said, you can speak to these questions, but really just generally would love to hear about your experience in the cohort, what you learned, what you're looking forward to.
Well, I learned a tremendous amount about the program. I'm going in not knowing hardly anything about it. It's been a true learning experience. We're a little unusual in that while we're providing services there, we're basically contracted through Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. So setting up something immediately would kind of not work because of the conflict with two state-run organizations. We're not allowed to double dip, which is clearly understood. But looking down the future, the type of technology that we're putting together, the ecosystem that we're looking to build, I see plenty of opportunity there because while we have trained independently of OVR in the past, bringing that back in to help bolster the work we're doing alongside of other service providers, I think it's going to have tremendous value. In terms of uh, one action that I'll definitely take, we haven't spoken to individuals yet at the state level because it's still a little bit premature. But being a technology company developing software for workforce development, I think it was Andrew's little box in the middle in that Venn diagram. That's where I see opportunity. With so many of these organizations, um, they lack technology at the center to be able to bring in the providers, the supporters, the funding into a centralized system. So that's just an offshoot, but that's something that is definitely top of mind right now. But great program, learned a tremendous amount, and looking forward to going further in the future.
Thanks so much for sharing, Scott. Yeah, I think a big part of this cohort is, are we a good fit, and are we a good fit right now, and what do we have to do to get there? And I think those are both good questions, and glad to hear that even if there's not kind of an immediate opportunity, you learned a lot about what it would take to kind of get there, and what are the things to kind of work on in the meantime. So appreciate you sharing.
Thank you.
Um, I think, Dina, I'm passing it to you, I believe, but I don't know if 12 Live staffing is on. I think.
I don't believe we have 12 live on. And then also, I just know that SOAR, they did let us know they had a conflict, so they weren't able to join on this one.
But I think we have someone from High Rocks on. Yeah. Pass it to
Yeah.
you.
All right. Thanks, Riley. Yes. Okay. So next we have High Rocks, which I can tell you that Andrew and I were just thrilled to work with High Rocks. They were so engaged from the get-go, really dug into identifying whether they were a good fit and if the timing was right. And just working with the two main contacts, which is Sarah, who is their executive director, and then Andrew, who's their CEO. Um, we've just, I guess, CFO, I should say. Um, these folks were just super engaged and really engaged in learning about the program and how their program would be a good fit. And so it was just a joy to work with this group. And I'll just turn it over to Andrew so that you can talk about all the hard work that you've done so far.
Yeah, learning about this program, first of all, we learned a ton by coming to the cohort and like just reading and getting all this information. Um, I knew very little coming in except like a broad overview of SNAP E&T, and it was like, well, that sounds like it fits. And then we learned more, and we were like, well, that really does fit, and then we got into the little more nitty gritty about the compliance and the metrics and like these matching rules and things. And so now we're in the thick of the compliance, and we were accepted to be a state provider beginning October 1st. However, our state human services office right now, it's a little bit in disarray. They are having some turnover, so we're coming into this, and we're saying that they're supposed to be submitting August 15th, and we have some application information, but not all of it. So like we are working hard to get a solid contact who they are filling right now, to make sure everything gets across the line. we had the email confirmation from the previous director, and so we're just making sure, we get all our ducks in a row. I feel pretty good about it. We do some pretty complex federal and state programs here, and I'm a little worried about the first year, just getting our feet under us and getting everything aligned because we certainly want to do it right. Um, but yeah, excited and I feel lucky that we found our way to this direction because this seems like a really solid solution um, to some of the funding gaps that we've experienced over the past couple of years, and it also just seems to fit right in. I don't think, like you're saying, you want to fit it into the programming that you're already doing. That was easy. I mean, that was the easy part. So I'm just excited to get moving on it, and hopefully we can get some organization going at our state level, and we can put on a good program.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. About the luck part, I don't know. You run such a really great program, and the way that you're aligning the workforce services with, the participants that you're currently serving, and you are having a new cohort that's coming in, or have they already? Is that right, Andrew?
We're bringing them, yeah, we're
Yeah.
in the hiring process. Their start is September 1st. So again, this is like the little bit of the offness with the federal fiscal year, but yeah, they are starting September 1st, and we're getting around 100 AmeriCorps members, and we've told the state that we're hoping to serve 40, and from our estimates and from our asking, like we believe we're going to hit that just between our AmeriCorps members and other people that are like, we have interns, we do AmeriCorps and we have interns, and we think we're going to easily hit that number.
And that's the uniqueness, I think, with this program, is that the population that they're serving, who is AmeriCorps, and aligning these workforce type of services along with their participants is pretty unique. And so I think that was something that was moving in your direction, definitely. I can't put words in the state mouth about how they felt about your program, but I gotta believe that had something to do with it. And just in my experience, just doing this technical assistance, it's kind of unheard of to know, starting out the cohort, the Appalachia cohort, and then getting into 2 or 3 technical assistance meetings, getting through that, and then suddenly, boom, you get some correspondence back from the state, and they're already offering to have you make application. I think was a really great feat, and we just are so happy for you to be in this position.
Well, thanks. Well, thank you guys. Yeah, we had some good relationships with workforce development people up there already, so that was certainly helpful that we weren't strangers up there. So
yeah, that definitely does make a difference when you already have relationships with the state and perhaps in other divisions or departments. Folks do understand that they do see your good work, and so that does it helps in building relationships for sure. All right. Is there anything else you want to add, Andrew?
I don't think so. Just a thank you to you all.
All right. Okay, I think I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, my Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Tina. So Eastern Action was already in a really good place. They've already been through a cohort with us before, and really were conscious and thinking about what services they have, what services they can do, and really digging in on primarily the non-federal funding piece and how to build that out as well. But I'm not going to put words in her mouth. Susan's here. She can talk about her program. So Susan, I'll pass it over to you.
I want to start off by saying we have an unstable network and you keep freezing up. So I may be in and out. I'm not sure. But like Andrew said, we had already went through this cohort before, and we had a really good understanding of what SNAP E&T was, and that we already have programming that we're doing those types of activities and providing those services in. We just didn't know how we were going to get the funding. So coming through and when we did it the first time and we left that cohort finished up, and we just knew we weren't in a place financially that we could do it. We knew we had the programming. We knew that we had a really good understanding and that we could work it in, but we just did not have funding. So we just put it on the back burner, didn't talk about it much. Matt went to a conference earlier this year, and it kind of got brought back up and into the forefront. And working through the cohort, every time we've met with Deanna and Andrew, it's always been, we don't know how we're going to do the funding. That's the piece we're still working on. We finally secured some funding through a foundation that we're going to be able to utilize for SNAP E&T purposes. So that has kind of been the last piece of our puzzle. And we're really excited about that. We're hoping to contact the state within the next 30 days to see if we can get an early start in January, or like January, April of next year. We're not ready for an October 1st. So that's out of the question, but possibly early 2027. If not, we will be very ready to go by October 27. So I think working through the cohort the second time really gave us more strength to move forward. So it just gave a stronger foundation to build the program off of. And once we got the funding source, we were like, yes, we're ready. We're ready to run.
Is Pollinate on the call?
I don't think they are.
So we'll just jump into next steps. Riley? Aaron? Somebody.
Sure. That's yeah, no worries. Hi. Well, so this is the end of this final cohort webinar. And so next steps, really, again, make sure you're getting in all of your technical assistance calls that you have with your TA providers. And you know what, even after this engagement is over, at least I know I like to know how you all are doing and get updates. So if you have a success down the road, in October or December or even next year, like where you have, got your program up and running or you've gotten approved, like please reach out and just like send us an email and let us know. Like we love to see the fruits of the labor with what we do here. And we also love to see other providers getting on board. SNAP E&T is still relatively, new to so many people. I'm sure that a lot of you as a provider never even knew that this was a program that existed. And so we're spreading that awareness, all over. And so we really love to see the successes. So, make sure you stay in contact with us. But stay in contact with us definitely right now while we're still working through this cohort, making sure that you're updating your work plans and that you have your pathway forward on how you're going to move forward. Also, bookmark that landing page with all of the resources that you've gotten throughout this process. And know too that even after we finish this cohort, there's going to be an affinity group that you're going to be invited to where you can come in and speak with other cohort members from other cohorts and work together to speak about our experiences, ask questions. It's really a great place for us to work together as a community and understand some of the challenges that we have, some of the successes that we've had, keep people updated on things that they're hearing about as it relates to SNAP E&T and how it affects your program. So look forward to that affinity group announcement and the schedule for those. Also know that we have those optional office hours going to be August 19th at 2 p.m. So you can come in, talk about anything, any questions that you might have in addition. And then finally, there will be a survey that Samantha is going to send out to all of you to kind of gauge like how this cohort has gone, what feedback do you have? What did you like? What did you not like? We're always looking to try to improve and make this process better for the next group. So really, really appreciate that feedback, and just know that it's so, so important that we get that. But with that, just know that we are all still here. We are here to support you through this journey. If you have any questions, please reach out. But with that, I just really want to thank you. It's been such a pleasure working with all of you. And I know we still have some TA sessions with at least the people that I'm working with. And it's just been a lot of fun. So I appreciate it.
And with that, I'm going to stop the recording.